Explore a new Madison hub of innovation. An introduction to Starting Block this morning on For the Record. Good morning, I'm Neil Heinen. Evidence grows seemingly weekly now that Madison's place as a smart city continues to grow. But smart cities are more and more creating and featuring innovation districts, and Madison needs one. Fortunately, that district is being created, and at the heart of it is, or will be, Starting Block. Longtime Madison planner and urban strategist George Austin's working on the project, and he joins me this morning, along with three Starting Block tenants to be: Forrest Woolworth, COO of PurBlue and co-founder of Capital Entrepreneurs; Chris Meyer, founder and director of Sector 67; and Troy Vossler, co-founder of Generator. Thank you all very much for joining me. And in a minute, I'm going to ask you all kind of to talk about what Generator and Sector and Capital Entrepreneurs is, so people get a sense of what Starting Block will be. But just from a conceptual perspective, George, talk about Starting Block. What is it?
Well, it's an exciting new concept. It's a collaborative place, bringing together successful entrepreneurs, thought leaders in terms of how to grow the IT manufacturing sectors in this region. It comes from the idea that the time to grow and improve is now. Madison doesn't face a crisis. The region doesn't face a particular crisis, but we have a great opportunity. While the state lost 45,000 20 to 40-year-olds between 2000 and 2010, the Madison region gained 10,000. That's a great opportunity. That's our future. That's our future economic development and economic growth. So this project is about bringing together successful partners in a single place that will become an entrepreneurial hub focused on entrepreneurship, education, and economic growth. And to be located in the heart of the city, the Capital East District, the idea that it builds upon the collaborative experiences of a healthy central city where young entrepreneurs want to be.
Yeah, it's interesting that you start with that description rather than a building, and you know, I don't want to overplay this, but you've got your fingerprints on some of the biggest developments in this city in the last 30 years. Monona Terrace, Overture. We'll just mention Judge Doyle Square and kind of let that be for now. But the idea is that this is more than just a building.
Well, it is more than a building. It's to create a place where Madison wants to become one of the top 10 IT hubs in the country. And to do that, this is kind of the next generation idea. It's been done elsewhere to a certain extent, but Madison has a unique experience here to bring together not only co-working spaces and successful entrepreneurs in an environment to grow ideas, spark young people, young adults in the ability to take an idea and grow it. But to do that in an environment where we actually have an entity like Sector 67 embedded, focused on education and creating this spark. It's really a unique exercise. It allows graduates from the university to flow into the private side of life through a hub like this. It allows other young people who have come to Madison, such as Epic employees, as they matriculate and find other opportunities, in some cases, to utilize a facility like this. We're very excited. It's kind of what's next here in economic development.
Well, and I mean, you mentioned top 10. I don't want to mislead people. That's a big goal. I mean, there are a lot of cities that want to be in the top 10, and there are dozens and dozens of cities that are competing for exactly this kind of a presence, right?
That's correct. But Madison is poised to make this happen at this point. And I think when you hear the stories from Troy and Forrest and Chris, you'll see why the time is now.
Well, I did mention that you three are prospective tenants of Starting Block. So in terms of giving people an idea of what it looks like, Forrest, talk about Capital Entrepreneurs, what its role is, and how you fit into Starting Block.
Yeah, so Capital Entrepreneurs is a community group for Madison area entrepreneurs. We started back in 2009 and have grown to over 300 members today, all of which are co-founders or early-stage employees of Madison area startup companies. And so Capital Entrepreneurs is kind of a social fabric that ties much of the entrepreneurial community together, in particular the younger tech entrepreneur community that's emerged the last couple of years here in town. And we do events and a bunch of other stuff as well that really kind of grows and help fosters this community. And as we've kind of grown Capital Entrepreneurs and seen more startups come up and grow, we've seen problems that these startups have encountered, and there's a lot of similarities. And one of the roles of Starting Block is to help startups solve some of their big problems, in particular more on the space side as they grow and scale. From just the 1 or 2 person team working out of a co-working space or an apartment, and really encapsulates the whole life cycle of a startup as they grow and scale and get more employees and see more success.
Right.
And we encountered a lot of these same issues with PerBlue in particular. So PerBlue is a mobile gaming startup company that I'm one of the early stage employees of, and we encountered these issues. We didn't have a co-working space or a common space to go work out of when we started the company. We worked out of our CEO's college apartment for the first 2 years, which was an interesting experience. And we've now moved to 5 different office spaces through our life cycle since we started about 5 years ago. And so kind of seeing the problems firsthand at PerBlue, and now kind of seeing other companies that are coming up have these same problems. Really wanted to help these companies solve these problems so that they can focus on building their business and not focusing on other distractions.
Maybe you should just describe co-working space. I mean, co-working space is a piece of Starting Block. It doesn't necessarily define Starting Block, but what is co-working space?
So it's basically a common space where people, a shared workspace where people can work in a collaborative environment. They can share resources, they can connect with each other, and in a more shared, or there's more reserved desk style that Starting Block would have both pieces of. And so it gives people an opportunity, a good kind of launching point where it's affordable space. It's an environment where it fosters their collaboration with other folks and amongst their team, and ultimately gives them a sense of community around them. Starting a company is a lonely process, especially if you're a sole co-founder or sole founder, and just being around other people is beneficial.
And what would be the expectation that a certain number of the 300 members of Capital Entrepreneurs would be in Starting Block?
Yeah, I think a decent number of people are very interested. We've done surveys and stuff with our members, and the kind of a lot of the pieces of Starting Block we've built around actual data from our member companies and what they're looking for, what their needs are. Everything from the office space components and the small office suite components to co-working members, and so a number of our companies would definitely.
My guests this morning, George Austin, Forrest Woolworth, Chris Meyer, and Troy Vossler, all partners in creation of Starting Block, an innovation hub, which is looking for a location. We'll get to that in a minute. There are a couple of potential locations, one in particular. But we're describing exactly what Starting Block is. And Chris, if you would continue that conversation by talking about Sector, which is a considerably different enterprise than what we've been talking about so far. What is Sector, and how does it fit into Starting Block?
Absolutely. So Sector 67 got its start a little bit after Capital Entrepreneurs in 2010. And I graduated from the university with an engineering degree. And as a student, I didn't quite have access to some of the workspace and some of the tools that I'd wanted. And so I founded Sector 67 with the intention of developing and growing a community workspace in Madison. And so what that sort of means is we have tools and equipment and resources that people can use, whether they're entrepreneurs or whether they're students in high school or middle school, or if they're just general members in the community who are interested as hobbyists or tinkers and getting access to some larger technology and some equipment that's more recently come out, or things that aren't available to kind of put in your home.
Yeah, but Chris, I mean, we were talking about tools here. Mm-hmm. These are different tools than we've talked up to this point. This is not software. And hardware.
So yeah, we've got some larger equipment that, I mean, we have a lot of entrepreneurs that come in and they're able to use like table saws and CNC routers and woodworking equipment, as well as metalworking equipment and modern things like 3D printers and laser cutters and all kinds of cool stuff. And the opportunity for these folks to leverage these new technologies and really build them into new opportunities and new startups is really now becoming more prevalent and happening a lot more often. 10 years ago, some of these things were hundreds of thousands of dollars, and now they're $1,000 on Amazon. You can get it next day in the mail. The challenge is understanding how to use these new technologies to build companies. And so we have folks who come in as entrepreneurs who just need access to them and need to leverage them in order to build their new brand. Other folks come in and they're students, maybe in local high schools or middle schools or neighbors, and they're interested in using this technology for themselves and just learning. They're lifelong learners maybe, and maybe they're retired folks who just want to come in and learn something new. And then sort of the third contingent is we have hobbies and tinkers, folks who come in and say, you know, my car needs a tune-up, or I need to fix my brakes or fix my tires or something. And so those are all things that people can leverage the workspace for.
Now that's what makes it a challenge to think of it physically in starting block. I mean, I get the idea that these are, in addition to being makers, people who are perhaps going to start companies, and hence the relationship to other entrepreneurs. But just in terms of physical space.
Yeah, we've been the challenging portion to fit into the starting block building. The difficulty is that we have a completely different use. Right now within Sector 67, we do have a business incubator, and we have desks that people can rent and workspace that people can use. And so we've got the blended model presently, but looking forward to a larger building and a larger facility and putting a lot more thought into it, it's been interesting to try and partner the need to be able to back in a semi and take a delivery of goods, as well as be able to have quiet space for people to work, as well as to be able to have really loud space to be able to run metalworking tools and who knows what else.
Yeah. Troy, talk about Generator.
Sure. So Generator is a startup business accelerator. We started 2 years ago, really with the mission of investing into early stage technology-based startups, businesses, and helping them with access to resources and mentors and follow-on capital to grow their businesses, to ultimately become successful, scalable companies. So at our core, we're an angel investment fund made up of private investors, and then twice a year we put on a 12-week lean startup mentorship-driven boot camp, if you will, for startup businesses. So in the winter, we run a 3-month program right here in Madison. In the summer, we put on a 3-month program in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And so twice a year, we're looking for the best, most interesting, most creative, passionate entrepreneurs really throughout the world. We have a competitive application process where entrepreneurs apply online. We then sift through those applications. We hold interviews, multiple rounds of interviews, and ultimately aim to invest in at least 5 companies per program, per cohort, and work with them, again, to become successful, scalable businesses. So started 2 years ago. To date, we've successfully completed 4 of these programs so far. We've invested in 23 companies total. Those 23 companies combined have gone on to raise just about $25 million in follow-on capital and have created nearly 150 jobs. And all those numbers continue to grow as time marches on and companies continue to hit milestones and continue to grow.
Is it accurate, Troy, to say that Generator begins the process of the thinking of the relationship to the ecosystem around entrepreneurship, and when you think of other a starting block like facilities in the United States, they tend to attract related businesses that are part of that ecosystem, and Generator seems like maybe that's a link to some of those things.
Absolutely. So we see ourselves as definitely a core building block of the overall starting block mission. So while there's no single point of entry, what we want, the vision of starting block is to provide multiple points of entry and allow for a leveling up of those entrepreneurs, of those startup businesses. So an entrepreneur could, their entree could be through an accelerator like Generator. It could be through Sector 67. It could be through Capital Entrepreneurs. The point being that we want to create an environment where there's the highest potential of serendipitous positive outcomes in terms of people bumping into each other, nodes vibrating in the system, again, for positive things to happen.
Yep.
If we look at cities like Chicago, where they have 1871 in the Merchandise Mart downtown, a great example, I think, of this collaborative entrepreneurial space. When we go down there, whether it's recruiting companies or taking our Wisconsin-based startups down there to pitch for investment capital from Chicago-based investors and venture capitalists, it makes for such an efficient process. We literally go to one spot, one physical location, where we have access to all those people, all those investors, and all those resources. And when you walk into 1871 or similar spaces throughout the country, the energy is contagious. You can just feel the energy, the passion, the collaboration that goes on there, and the metrics prove it, especially with 1871 in terms of the success that they've had.
Yeah.
And so we really see ourselves as being an anchor tenant along with Sector 67 and Capital Entrepreneurs in having that happen right here in Madison.
When I think of 1871, though, the fascinating thing about Starting Block is that it's not 1871. And now this begins to compete with 1871 in attracting talent here. Which gets me to the point of building a place and deciding to stay here in Madison. I think the conventional wisdom is that entrepreneurs are here for a little while and then they just want to go. This would seem to indicate, Forrest and Chris, that people want to stay here.
Mm-hmm.
I was gonna say, we've all graduated from Madison, at least Forrest and I have, and yeah, we wanted to stay in the city and we wanted to build out things, and we both saw niches where there weren't opportunities being fulfilled, and we both took those as entrepreneurs and took the lead on it and went for generating a thing that benefited us as well as benefited others in the community.
Yeah, and with Per Blue, we built Per Blue in Madison. We chose to be in Madison. We've been here, been around for over 5 years now. We got asked many times to come out to the Valley, Silicon Valley, and relocate out there early on especially, and actively really wanted to stay in Madison because we loved Madison. We loved the access to talent, and our employees loved living here. And so that's one of the other reasons why we are very passionate about making Madison a great place for other startups as well, and helping them grow, not just start here, but grow here and stay here.
Right. Well, when we come back, we're going to talk about where Starting Block might be, and we'll do that right after this. My guests this morning are talking about Starting Block, an innovation hub, a center of innovation that is been conceived of and created here in Madison. It is currently looking for a location. And George Austin, who's been working on stuff like this for as long as I've been doing this show, and beyond, the place is really important here. And we've had done For the Record on the Cap East District and the work that's been done on the Cap East District several times. But where would Starting Block likely be? Where does it stand right now? What are the challenges in finding a place for this?
Well, just a little bit of background to start. The three guys to my left have been involved in this for about 1.5 years. They're really the thought leaders that really thought now was the time for this to happen. And so pulling the ideas together, Starting Block's an entity. It's actually been created as a Wisconsin corporation. It's received IRS tax-exempt status. So it is going to be the operating entity for this entrepreneurial hub, this environment, this collaborative environment we're trying to create. And to do that, we need a place. And based on surveys of Capital Entrepreneur members and others, focusing on the Central City, the Near East Side came up as the highest rated place that entrepreneurs wanted to be. When you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. We've talked about the Capital East District as kind of the new frontier for downtown development. It has the opportunity to bring significant jobs to the Central City, to be in the core of the region. And Starting Block is really that toehold in that. This is a statement that if this can happen, it really means we're going to make this happen. So the private sector, public sector working together can make Starting Block a reality. To do it, we have to have a place. And so we've been searching for a place for the last year plus, and it's actually been more difficult than one would first think as you drive through the neighborhoods. But we're focused on a building right now in the 700 block of Williamson Street, built as a warehouse 100 years ago, about 60,000 square feet in size, so it accommodates the program that's being discussed here today. Built, as I said, as a warehouse, so it's got the bones at work, and it's near the things that are important. It's near coffee shops and neighborhoods and bike paths and recreational areas and other businesses that are growing in the area. So it's not like it used to be where people would be isolated in creating of ideas. This modern era is about collaboration and being together, that spark that Forrest mentioned a bit ago.
Yeah, and we've touched on that, but maybe we should be more explicit that the idea of innovators wanting proximity to each other is really an important part of this, right?
That's a big goal. Big goal of Starting Block is to consolidate all these entrepreneurs and companies into a single area or a general area. And so for us, that area is the block surrounding the Capitol Square and leading out through the Capital East District. And so that's where our focus has been in terms of locating a site. Also keeping in mind that in addition to bringing all these people together, we also need to accommodate the various functions that each of us bring to the table. So as Chris mentioned, when you're working with metal cutting and laser cutters and woodworking materials and that produce noise and exhaust, there's other environmental elements that we need to take into consideration in terms of site location, and I think we've done a great job of doing that.
This is an investment opportunity, right? I mean, you're looking for investors in this.
That's right. To make this happen, this will have to be seen as a priority. The goal is to create a place that's sustainable, that will be here for some time. And as I've discussed, it takes the emphasis off the entrepreneur having to worry about negotiating leases, worrying about those terms, and focusing on the key role, their key idea, growing their company, and a place where they can receive the collaborative environment, other collaborators, and we haven't really mentioned, but not only do the young entrepreneurs here today has kind of created this idea, but there are a lot of collaborators like the UW Law and Entrepreneurship Clinic, the Madison Regional Economic Partnership, Greater Madison Chamber of Commerce, Madison Gas and Electric, all have supported this effort heretofore to bring this idea through the entity being created to now actually having a place where we are pursuing an ask of the community. We do need funding partners. We've had great support from the city, and we expect they will be a partner in this project, but we need other private sector players that will say, yes, the time is now, and by creating this and providing the capital up front, we can create a sustainable enterprise. It doesn't need to go back year in, year out to ask for funds to sustain itself, but rather through the memberships and the rent being paid can sustain the programming. It's a very exciting concept.
We just have a minute left. This is not new to Capital Entrepreneurs Force, but this puts you in a position of telling investors this is a smart investment, right?
It does, yeah. So, I mean, so this is a great opportunity for the business community and the broader Madison community to step up and really invest in the future of Madison's economy.
And I don't think people thought of the sector necessarily as being something that they could invest in, but there are probably people out there who would like to do that.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest key components of all this is all three of these entities have been around for a number of years. This isn't something new individually, but as a bulk group effort, putting together something larger like Starting Block is really, really important. You get the catalytic reaction of all these things combined together and really in proximity, and I think that's what's really powerful.
We need another half an hour. So we'll grab one, okay? We'll grab one a little later. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
We're going to come back and wrap up For the Record right after this. I direct investors' attention to startingblockmadison.org, and I'll see you next week on For the Record.